Western. I'm a junior at O'Day, and you are.
I'm Brady Henderson.
Oh, cool. You're a Seahawks reporter for the ESPN NFL Nation, and before this, you spent 7 years with the 710 ESPN Seattle. My first question for you is, what made you want to be a journalist?
It was always the perfect marriage of things that I was into and things that I was good at. And I spent a lot of time growing up in the newsroom at the Seattle Times because my parents both worked there and my preschool was a few blocks away. So I always felt comfortable in that environment. And as I started to grow up, I obviously was really into sports. And I realized I was better at writing and words than I was at math and anything else, basically. So
Yeah.
um, it always just seemed like that was the natural path for me. And my parents never pressured me into it or anything like that, but it always just seemed like for as long as I could remember thinking about what I wanted to be when I grew up, that was it. And so I was fortunate that when I went to college, I didn't have to screw around with different majors trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do, and I was able to hit the ground running when I got to Western.
Oh, okay, cool. My next question is, how is it turning your hobby into your job? Like, not really. Like, a lot of people say they have a 9 to 5 as a job, and a lot of people say they have a career, which turning their hobby into something they can do for a living. How has that been?
It's been interesting. I think that at least in my experience, being a sports writer to some degree takes the fan out of you. I mean, certainly I'm not a Seahawks fan anymore. I mean, I grew up in Seattle, obviously went to O'Day, and I was a Seahawks fan growing up. But um, when you start covering a team as a beat writer, you can't be a fan anymore. You just because you can't cover the team objectively and still be a fan. So I've totally had to divorce myself from that. But I'm still a fan of football, and I watch football games. Like I watch playoff games, or if the Seahawks have a Sunday off, I'll watch the NFL just as a fan of the game and of the league and of obviously whatever players are on my fantasy team. But I don't cover the Seahawks with any sort of allegiance to them, and I always say like if they win or lose, it doesn't really matter to me. It's not my job to care about whether they win or lose. It's my job to help people understand why it happened and what might happen next. And so I'm the only times I'm really a fan are like when I watch golf. There's certain players that I root for. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Um, my next question is, from O'Day, how did O'Day lead you in your direction? Like, what steps did you take while in high school to make sure when you got to Western, you're ready to be a journalist?
Um, well, O'Day did not have the sports journalism program when I was there, unfortunately, but I think it just helped me in general. I don't know if it helped me specifically on that path. It just helped me in general, like helped me become a man. And I think anybody who's gone to O'Day will tell you that. Like it kind of whips you into shape and, you know, um, just shows you what it means to, be an adult. And my three best friends in life are three guys I went to high school with, and still keep in touch with a lot of people. So um, I think it just helped me in general in my development as a person, probably more so than specifically in my career path.
Oh, okay, cool. Going back to O'Day, my dad always says my dad went to O'Day. And he said that while he was at O'Day, he never really felt like what the brotherhood was. And then when he got out of O'Day, out of college, he really started to feel the brotherhood. When would how would you relate to what my dad would say?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think I agree with that, and I think part of it is when you're going to high school, that's all you really know, and your world is O'Day High School, um, and you don't really have anything else to compare it to, and so I totally get what he's saying there, and I constantly get reminders of that. I'll give you a good example of one from a few months ago. So the Seahawks signed an O'Day grad named Miles Gaskin
Yeah.
in at some point in the fall, and I introduced myself in the locker room, and I went in for just a standard handshake, and I said, "Hey, my name's Brady Henderson. I cover the Seahawks for ESPN, and I went to O'Day High School. I was class of 2004." And as I'm doing the introduction, he's reaching out his hand to shake mine, and then when he hears that I tell him that I went to O'Day, it goes from a handshake to a full on bro hug.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, so that's a pretty good example of as soon as he heard that I was a fellow O'Day alum, the whole dynamic of the interaction changed, and I think that's just what I think you'll realize when you graduate and you go on and meet people and you just run into people randomly, and you if you if you guys both went to O'Day, you'll see what I mean, just because there will be that just sense of connection to somebody even though you've never met them.
Okay, awesome. Going back to the journalist side, I would say, for me personally, like I completely understand what you're coming from. Like I've struggled in math, struggled in science, but I've always felt that writing was my strong suit, and especially in sports, I would say like the best thing I would say the best thing I'm good at is sports. I feel like I know the ins and outs, especially in baseball and football, main sports in Seattle. What would you say to a student that wants to follow the same path that you did?
Yeah, the thing I tell people all the time, like, young aspiring journalists, is, read as much as you can, and read it because you're studying that person's writing, not just because you want to know what happened with the Mariners that night, but really read it critically and try to figure out, hey, why did they write it this way? Why did they write the lead this way? Why did they use this quote there? Um, there's no real substitute for consuming sports writing if you want to be a sports writer. Um, I mean, you can go to school and they can teach you kind of the basics of it, but there's so much creativity that's involved in sports writing, and you just can't really. It's hard to teach that. You just have to kind of have a feel for it, and the way you develop that feel is by reading, different sports writers. And I always say that I think everybody's writing style is, a good percentage of it is just kind of how they're naturally wired to write, and then the rest of it is you pick up pieces of people's writing that you admire, right? So like my writing style is it's just a good chunk of like kind of how I'm naturally inclined to write, but also it's a combination of different things I've kind of picked up from the different sports writers that I grew up reading and that I still read to this day. And so um, you sort of have to make it your own. You don't want to like copy someone's style per se, but it we're all just sort of everybody's writing style is kind of like I said, it's like a mix of different writers that they like, I think.
Okay, cool. Um, Kind of going off what you said to make your own words unique. How would you say AI and social media has really changed journalism and sports journalism?
Well, with AI, I think it's still too early to say. Um, I don't have a great answer for you on that. I think kind of like, it's there it seems like there's been some outlets that have experimented with AI generated stories, and maybe the technology gets better down the road to where it doesn't sound like it was just spit out of a computer, but the stuff I've read is it just sounds very, generic and formulaic, and it is really seems like it's missing that human element to it. And so, but too early to say how that's going to go. Social media has changed it dramatically, and I would say not just social media, but just blogs. 50, 30, 40 years ago, um, your job as a sports writer was pretty narrowly focused, right? You would write a story for the newspaper. Um, but there's no such thing really anymore as a journalist who only writes. Like we're all, like my main job at ESPN is writing for the website, but I'll go on TV every now and again. I'll produce videos where I just set up a tripod and hold a microphone and plug it into my phone and film that. And those videos go on the website. I'll do ESPN radio or other radio stations around the city or around the country. So um, you're like a multimedia journalist now. You're no longer just a sports writer. And I think it's probably the earlier that young aspiring journalists can grasp that and get comfortable behind on camera or with the microphone in their hand, the better. Just because even if your main job, like me, is writing, you're still doing a lot more than just writing.
Oh, okay, cool. Going back to it said that well, I looked you up obviously, try to know a little about you, and it
Okay.
said that you spent 7 years with 710 ESPN Seattle. And how do you think that helped you get to where you are now as being a Seahawks reporter for ESPN?
Yeah, that was big. My main job there was I was the editor of the website, so I was in charge of all the content on the website, and, laying it out and producing a lot of it myself, editing it. But we were a small operation there, and so I kind of had to do more than just that. I had to like actually go out and cover the Seahawks a lot to supplement, the people we had writing about the Seahawks. And that was around the time that they hired Pete Carroll, they drafted Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner and all them, and the Seahawks really started to get good and relevant again in Seattle. And the more I did that, the more I realized that's what I wanted to do. I grew up really baseball was the sport that I loved the most, and I thought I was going to cover baseball for a living for a long time. And then I started covering the Seahawks more and more, and got more and more comfortable with it, learned, started to have an idea of what I was doing. And so the more specific story is in 2015, the job that I have now opened up. Um, I didn't end up getting the job until 2017, but it opened up in 2015. And I heard that it opened up, and I got a hold of an editor at ESPN and said, "Hey, I understand this job is open. I'd love to apply." And they told me that I was too late and that they already had somebody that they were probably going to hire, but he was moving from Philadelphia, and there was going to be a gap between when the previous guy was done and when they were getting the new guy in town. And they said, "Okay, we're not going to hire you, but can you fill in for a couple weeks and help fill this gap?" And so I treated that like I think it ended up being 2.5 weeks, but I just treated it like an extended job interview, knowing that if I really nail this, interim job, then I'll be on the short list of, candidates when it opens up again. And so, sure enough, that's what happened. So it opened up again in 2017, and I ended up getting it. But I don't think I would have got it, or maybe wouldn't have got it had I not, had they not already known who I was, and had I not had that kind of extended tryout, uh, and had I not taken it as seriously as I did.
Oh, okay, cool. Like kind of getting yourself into that situation to put yourself up for success. Um, the question on that is, since you've had the job at ESPN in a world full of pressure and trying to get stuff like done and make sure it's good, how have you as a writer dealt with that pressure?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, the pressure is the pressure that I feel at my job is mostly the pressure I put on myself. And I kind of have this like perfectionist tendency which gets in the way of writing a lot of times. And this is another thing I tell aspiring journalists, in the hope that they won't get discouraged if they sit down and try to write something and the words don't come to you easily. Well, that's basically me every time I sit down to write something. So that doesn't mean that you're not cut out for it. There's writers who can do that. Like one of my friends on the Seahawks beat, Bob Condotta, who covers the team for the Seattle Times. I'm always in amazement about how he'll fire up his laptop and start typing away as though he just never needed any time to think about it. And it's always really good. But not everybody is like that. I'm certainly not like that. So, but part of that is, I just put undue pressure on myself to for my writing to be perfect, and I've gotten a lot better at that over the years. It's just gotten easier to kind of let go. But that is kind of the pressure that I feel like I face in my job. It's not really pressure from anything external. It's really the pressure I put on myself.
Oh, okay, cool. And one last question for you. Kind of a bonus question. What has been the best moment of your job so far?
The best moment of my job so far. Hmm, that is a good question. I mean, covering Super Bowls is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'd have to say that I've been fortunate to cover four of them. The three that the Seahawks have been in over the last, 13 years, whatever it is. And then I also covered one in Super Bowl 56. Um, the one of my coworkers who covered the Rams at the time, Lindsay Theory, she had to go on maternity leave, and so I stepped in and covered the Rams during the playoffs. And yeah, that would probably be the highlight is you know being at the game that you know a good chunk of the world is watching and the biggest sporting event in our country, and being there with the job of covering it, it doesn't get much better than that in this profession.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. Maybe I'll see you around O'Day this year, and can't wait to meet you.
Yeah, you bet,
So,
Brady. Yeah, thanks for having me.
nice to see you. Thank you so
All right,
much.
you bet. See ya.
See ya.